Hey everyone, this is Lomi, and Puppy's asleep, so we're gonna make a video. Over the past few months, I've been working on casting the head I sculpted for my doll Tahl. I've shared bits and pieces of the creation process before, streamed some finishing work and things like that, but I thought it would be fun to do a video about actually preparing the molds and casting the head, and that didn't work out. I've shared a video before about casting the first ever head sculpt I made, the one for Rune, and for round one of the process for Tahl, I did things pretty similarly. I built a mold box out of foam board and hot glue, filled the head with clay in order to do a two-part mold, and all that. Here you can see me preparing the box for the head cap, but if you're interested in a video where I go a bit more in depth into every step, you can check out the video I made for casting Rune previously. One of the primary reasons I wanted to cast the pieces in this orientation was so that all the vent sprues and pour tabs would be on the inside of the doll's head, where sanding marks wouldn't be visible. That worked well for Rune, and since I'll be using some tan pigments for Tahl, it seemed like a good idea. The only piece that got oriented for a side parting mold instead of a top parting mold was the neck disc, which wouldn't be visible anyway. After the mold boxes were ready, I prepared my silicone for the initial casting, and around this time, something went wrong, and I lost every bit of footage for the mold making and casting process, which is kind of a major bummer. The only piece I was able to recover was from the remaking of a mold using a different type of silicone after the first mold didn't work out. So this blue stuff is Platinum Cure silicone from Unicorn Art, and it ended up being a really big challenge to use, but it does make very nice molds. I had problems with basically everything inhibiting the mold, from the sulfur-free clay that said it was Platinum Cure safe to even the hot glue, and that was a mess. I originally had intended to talk about all those issues in depth, but without the footage to show you, it's hard to explain the problems. So I think I'll save that for another time because Tahl is not the last doll head I'll be making. Instead, this ended up being a bit more vloggy because all I have to show is the actual finished molds. The first one was a mold I made with Tin Cure silicone. This pink stuff is lomilmalinde High Strength 3, and I honestly like this silicone much better than the blue stuff. The mold itself turned out beautifully, but I had problems with the vent sprues not adhering to the doll's head, so they came off and started floating in the silicone and ended up not venting anything. So I had to cut a new pour tab and new vents, which meant there would be visible sanding marks, and that's kind of disappointing, but it is what it is. The head cap mold has a lot of vents and it turned out better. Overall, I think the head cap mold is still usable. The head mold had one major problem beyond the vents though, and that's this weird flaw that appeared against the doll's chin. I'm not sure what caused that, but it wasn't fixable, so that head mold is basically trash and will have to be thrown away. It's disappointing, but this is something that happens with doll making. The worst part is that silicone is super expensive and the head mold cost around $80 to make. That's a lot of money to lose because of one flaw, but that's doll making. That's why BJDs are so expensive. One mold can make maybe 15 heads before it deteriorates, and they're not all guaranteed to be A-grade heads either. The neck disc mold turned out well though, so that one is being used for final production. When I switched to the Unicorn Art silicone, I decided to do a one-part mold for the head cap so it would only require one vent. Unfortunately, the only way to make it stand for a one-part mold was to position the pour vent on the outside of the head cap. These molds are ready for the next casting to be poured, so I won't open them up, but you'll see that this part's on the sides and the pour spout's on the top. For the new head mold, I did a two-part mold again, but round to save silicone because it could fit more closely against the doll's head. I used my Ender 3 to print a basic PLA mold frame, which is also great for supporting the mold while it's in the pressure pot for casting. I wish I'd done the same thing for the head cap mold because this lets me put rubber bands on the support frame instead of the silicone mold, which eliminates the possibility of the mold warping. And this is one of the casts from the blue mold. This hasn't been cleaned up yet, but you can see this turned out beautifully. No errors, no flaws, just flash and pour tabs and vents to trim off and sand. This actually was an accidental color. He was supposed to be a darker tan, but I love how it turned out. I made one that's a similar color to Impel Doll's normal pink, and it's very fair, but I think it turned out well overall. I have had some problems with bubbles in the mold around the magnet wells, but I think changing to a slower curing resin will help with that so the bubbles have more time to escape. This white one was the very first cast, which is a clean out cast to remove junk from the mold. You can see there's bits of clay and dirt embedded in the resin here, and that's what the clean out cast is for, because it would be impossible to wash out all the little nooks and crannies of a mold by hand. This tan head is one that I cast from the original flawed mold, but it's a good color. The main problem with having the vents on the top, though, is that it means having the mold very flat, which allows large air bubbles to get trapped in the upper edge of the doll's head. You can see there are a bunch of bubbles stuck here, and also in the top of one ear and around the magnet well too. I was able to solve some of these by orienting the head at an angle in the blue mold, which eliminated the need for anything but a little vent at the top of the ear. There were no vents needed anywhere else, as long as I remembered to give the mold a good shake before I put it into the pressure pot to cure. In the future, I may try doing a one-part mold so I can stand the head a little more vertically, but I can't do that until I figure out what kind of clays and glues and tapes to use with the silicone to prevent cure inhibition. I'm making progress, but we're not there just yet. Another thing that will help is changing what resin I use. I've been using Lumalite Amazing Casting Resin, which cures white, and it's my favorite. But it cures incredibly fast, so it doesn't give air a lot of time to escape from the mold. That clear cast you saw at the beginning was made with Smooth Cast 326, and while I really like this resin, it needs an opaque pigment. My dyes are from Lumalite and work well with the white resin, but they were advertised as being opaque and they're not, which is why the tan made the Smooth Cast this weird orange instead of the pretty tan I get with the Lumalite white resin. But I guess there's not much I can do about products being incorrectly labeled. It's been a very troublesome process, but I'm still making headway. The head cap from the pink mold turned out just as well as the head cap from the blue mold, so I can keep both of those in production for now, and I may use the pink one exclusively for darker colors in order to reduce sanding marks. In the end, this is my first A-grade cast for Tahl, made in tan, and this is my personal doll. I'm not done sanding yet because I ran out of fine grit sandpapers, but you can see how sanding the pour tabs at the top of the head causes discoloration. This will be less noticeable once my new sandpapers get here and I can finish the job, but for now this is it. The casting process video didn't work out, but at least I can show you how the doll actually turned out. The disc piece I created for the neck allows the head to fit on smaller necks you see on slender dolls, and larger necks like you see on April House and those sort of dolls. This doll is strung a little too tight for him to lift his head as well as he could, but he can look down pretty far, which I really like for my character. The tan turned out really smooth, and I just love how his features look in this color. Not that he looks bad in the others, this is just always how I envisioned him. From here, I'll be moving ahead to finishing my personal cast and giving him a face-up, but I'll have more information on pre-orders after I work out the last few hitches so that I can be sure every doll I produce is the best possible quality. And that's all for today, though. Thanks for watching. Bye.